Good morning, children. Yesterday we ended on the note whereby we were discussing the rapid expansion of Buddhism and the Buddhist teachings into different parts of the Asian subcontinent, and also the fact that this expansion had also led to certain conflicts within the Buddhist Sangha itself, whereby the issue of bhikshunis, and that is something that was not that's not there in the book, but that I told you that yes, this was one of the very important reasons why. Which caused a great amount of and a great deal of rift between the great Buddhist scholars who were the contemporaries of Buddha, the disciples of Buddha himself, who where the whole kind of jury was divided, whereby half of them did not want any bhikshuni around, but then there were certain within who were also the close confidants of Buddha himself, who were in favor of it. So let us continue today. Buddhism grew rapidly during the lifetime of Buddha in and after his death, as it appealed to many people dissatisfied with existing religious practices and confused by the rapid social changes taking place around them. The importance attached to conduct and values rather than the claims of superiority based on birth, the emphasis placed on metta, that is, fellow feeling, and karuna, compassion, especially for those who were younger and weaker than oneself, were ideas that drew men and women to Buddhist teachings. Students, you have to understand that this is students. This exactly is. I wish I was in class and we all were in class and I could have explained it in a far better fashion. But I would like to kind of touch upon this problem. It's not an issue; it's actually a problem. Which this is something which all the old institutions encounter, whether it is an educational institution or whether it is a religious institution or it's a religious society or it's a society. Guys, India happens to be, or the Sanatan society happens to be, an extremely old civilization, one of the oldest surviving, along with the Chinese civilization. We Indians are the oldest surviving civilization on the planet. And with the same and with the same kind of belief system today that we've been following for the last 6 7 thousand years. Right, so that's no mean feat. Guys, even the Egyptians were very ancient civilizations, but today's Egypt is nothing what it was, or the Egyptian society of today is nothing what it was during the time of pharaohs 2000 or 3000 years before Christ. But today, if you look at Indian civilization, it has almost carried the same kind of culture, the traditions, the faith systems, the gods, the food. Most of it is kind of we've been carrying on from one generation to another and from the other generation to the other. Now, this might appear to be in certain areas it gives a great amount of strength and stability to the structure. That is true. But then, if a society kind of moves on for hundreds and thousands of years, then you also have to understand that there is a great amount of garbage that keeps collecting from one generation and one century to another. So by the time, and a lot of garbage, a lot of nonsense, a lot of prejudices, a lot of biases, because ultimately we all are humans, right? When you do not have new ideas coming in, you do not have fresh thoughts and fresh ideology coming in, because you all of you us were at that point in time we only knew about the Sanatan Dharma, that was the Sanatan way of life. But then after 2000, here we are talking about that the time of Buddha, that is 600 years before Christ. Now 600 years before Christ, in terms of our Indian society, was nothing, because even before Buddha was born in India, we were at least a 3000-year-old civilization by then, right? So you can understand a great amount of garbage and muck had already been collected. Now, but there was no way out. But Buddhism, not just Buddhism, in fact, Buddhism, Jainism, these were the faiths and belief systems which gave a fresh lease of life to Indian society. in terms of fresh ideas, fresh air. There was less rigidity. You suddenly have had alternatives. In the Sanatan way of life, you did not have alternatives because there was something which you had been following for almost 3,000 years. There was a great amount of prejudice, bias, garbage that had got collected in the garbage that is in in our brains, of course, that had got collected. Now, you needed fresh air, but there wasn't any. But when Buddhism and Jainism, when these two faith systems rose into prominence and exploded in the scene, people found great many virtues in them which they felt was lacking, and which they felt that their mainstream religion was not able to provide them with, right? And so a lot of people from, especially from the weaker sections of the society, got attracted towards Buddhism. Weaker sections of the society, because as we have studied in the previous chapters, a lot of injustice had also been meted out to people, because they were from lower castes and lower varna systems and lower jatis. And they always felt that the truth could be, yes, the truth is always somewhere in the middle, right? But then they always felt that yes, they were the worst lot. They never got a good deal from the society. And the moment a faith came up, like Buddhism, which was only talking about fellow brotherhood and compassion and denouncing of desires and attainment of the great teachings and the gyan and the theorem of karma, that if you do good things you get good things in return, if you do bad things you get bad things in return, really emphasizing upon these things. And mostly, because and most importantly, Buddhism was not about the varna system, it was not about the jati system. There was just one thing and everyone was a Buddhist. It was, you just believed in the teachings of Buddha. There was no hierarchy that there's this, because there was just one Buddha, right? That is the thing about it. And it's the same thing with guys, Christianity for that matter. You do not have a Varna or a Jati system in Christianity, in Europe or in America for that matter, because everyone is into just what? Jesus. So, stupas. We have seen that Buddhist ideas and practices emerged out of the process of dialogue with other traditions, including those of the Brahmins, Jains, and several others. Not all of those ideas and practices were preserved in texts. Some of these interactions can be seen in ways in which sacred places came to be identified. Students, you have to understand that much before Gautam Buddha rose into prominence, there was an enormous amount of there was an enormous amount of spiritual activity that was going on in India before that time. We had great traditions of Ramayana and Mahabharata, and people used to, there were great rishis and maharishis and great teachers, great scholars. All of that was already there in India, right? All of that teachings and gyan and learning had already been discovered and invented, and it was being churned out all the time. So not that Buddhism came up, before Buddhism came up, there was nothing. Of course, there was plenty. There was plenty actually already. So that is what it is saying here, that the Buddhist ideas and practices emerged out of a process of dialogue with interactions with other traditions like Brahmanism and the Jains. Students, you have to understand one very important thing. I've told you all the time, and even when we were in class, in class 11, you have to understand that uh, you really can get and study and learn the true and the objective history of an empire or a geography, and not just or a ruler, not just by what has been recorded by the people of that geography or that kingdom or that empire. You also, or that society for that matter, it is considered to be a genuine and an authentic piece of work Especially the historians and the scholars are interested to find out what your contemporaries have written about you. Like, for example, the Indian way of life was recorded in great detail by the scholars of China, and that is the reason why we always had a steady stream of Chinese scholars who used to visit India, because they have recorded extensively whatever was happening in India. And in the similar fashion, on a much more micro level, it was very important that what was being recorded about the Magad Mahajanpada by the Takshila Mahajanpada and vice versa, or Ujjaini Mahajanpada, the scholars and the historians of Ujjain Mahajanpad were writing about Magad, or the Magad scholars were writing about Ujjain. So those accounts are considered to be far more authentic and genuine, and less inclined to just talking favorably about your own. Like, for example, I'm an Indian. I cannot hear anything against Mother India in front of someone else. I will always talk about the great things that Indian society is about, and it has done for me, and it has done for everyone around. So, but if you really want to be to do an objective study, then definitely you would also like to read and study what Sri Lankans think about you, what Sri Lankans have written about you, what the people of Nepal have written about you, the people of Pakistan have written about you, Bangladesh have, Chinese have, right, Bhutan. So these things and these accounts are extremely important. So and they can write about you only when they have interacted with you. They cannot write it and just they just it cannot be a figment of their imagination, right? They have to interact with you, and that's what exactly has been written here. The Buddhists learned a lot from Brahmins, the Brahmins learned a lot from Buddhists, the Jains learned a lot from Brahmins, the Brahmins learned a lot from all of them. So guys, that kind of churning and interaction was always on at that level, right? And that's what is being mentioned here. From earliest time, people tended to regard certain places as sacred. These included sites with special trees or unique rocks, or sites of awe-inspiring natural beauties. These sites with small shrines attached to them were sometimes described as the chaityas. A chaitya, as it's mentioned in the box, may also have been derived from the word chitta, meaning a funeral pyre, and by extension, a funerary mound. Uh, Okay, students, I shall continue tomorrow. Thanks.